Miles Benton stood frozen, his mop still dripping when the billionaire heiress shouted, "If he can move me with music, I'll marry him." The crowd burst into cruel laughter. "Let the janitor try," someone sneered. But Miles didn't flinch. His eyes locked on the piano like it owed him justice. Then, in a room built to ignore men like him, he sat down, and what came next silenced the world and destroyed everything he had left. The Van Doren Foundation's Winter Charity Gala was less about charity and more about theater. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. Held inside the gilded ballroom of the Crescent Regency Hotel, once a church, now a cathedral to wealth. The evening had all the predictable gloss, velvet invitations with gold-leafed lettering, a waitlist full of people desperate to be seen, and a 100-year-old Steinway grand piano gleaming under a 10-foot crystal chandelier. It was a room built to remind people of their status. The music was background. The art was a backdrop. The real show was power. Who had it? Who wanted it? And who was pretending not? Celeste Van Doren stood at the center of it all, like a reluctant queen. In a sea of black and white gowns and tuxedos, she wore a deep crimson satin dress with an open back and no apologies. Her blonde curls were swept into a loose, effortless twist, makeup soft, lips bold, but nothing about her eyes suggested ease. Her eyes searched for something to feel. She sipped her champagne, unmoved by the performance ending on the ballroom stage, a stiff, too-polished recital of Rachmaninoff by the son of a junior senator. The notes were flawless but hollow. Celeste's fingers tapped her glass stem, more in boredom than in rhythm. As applause rippled around the room, more out of obligation than admiration, she stepped forward, raising her glass. Her voice rang clear, slicing through the lull like a knife wrapped in velvet. "If anyone here can move me with music," she announced, "I'll marry them." The room froze, then erupted. Laughter echoed, high-pitched, sharp, loaded. "Someone's been drinking her PR budget," one socialite hissed to her friend. Not quietly enough. Chase Langford, Celeste's fiancé by arrangement, more than affection, stepped forward with a smug smirk. He wore a tailored white tux and an expression like the world owed him applause for existing. "That's a hell of a prenup clause, babe," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. "Should I call my lawyer or my piano coach?" More laughter. Celeste didn't blink. She smiled, a cool, unreadable curve of her lips. "I'm serious," she said. "Music is supposed to mean something. If it doesn't move you, why bother pretending it does?" Margot Penfield, editor of Culture and Vice, narrowed her eyes from across the room. "Is this a new campaign angle, Celeste? Because I already hate it." "It's not for the press," Celeste said, sipping. "It's for me." A buzz rolled through the ballroom. People nudged each other. Some rolled their eyes, some reached for their phones, and others, mostly those hungry for the kind of viral chaos that made reputations rise or collapse overnight, lined up by the piano. A hedge fund manager banged out Bohemian Rhapsody with the finesse of a drunk uncle at a wedding. A fashion model tried a delicate Debussy piece, but cracked under the pressure halfway through and giggled it off. One influencer played a single note repeatedly and called it a meditation on capitalism. Each time, Celeste watched in stone-faced silence. The piano began to feel less like an instrument and more like a test no one could pass. Then a silence fell. Not because of who walked in, but because of what didn't happen. He didn't walk in. Exactly. He'd been there, all night, cleaning, quiet, invisible. Miles Benton moved like someone trying not to take up space. Dressed in navy blue coveralls, with a faded patch stitched above his heart that read Miles, he pushed a mop bucket past the grand piano as the last contestant stepped away. The floor beneath him glistened wet and clean. He didn't look up. He didn't stop. He just moved with the rhythm of someone used to being overlooked. But someone noticed. Celeste. Her eyes followed the motion of the mop, then his hands, then his face. He was maybe in his late 20s, maybe early 30s. Black, tall, slim. His skin had the kind of soft mahogany tone that camera lenses never quite captured right. There was something about the way his eyes flickered toward the piano, not with envy or longing, but with ache. An ache so old it had stopped being loud and had become silent instead. Someone scoffed behind her. "What? The janitor thinks he can play." Celeste didn't answer. She watched. Another voice. "Hey man, wrong stage. Cleanups after midnight. Miles didn't respond. He didn't laugh. He didn't explain. He kept cleaning. But the way he glanced at the piano again, it was a betrayal. His eyes lingered. Too long. Chase clocked it immediately. You lost, buddy. Or just taking a break from scrubbing my shoes. The cruelty wasn't just in the words. It was in the performance of them. In the fact that Chase knew the room would back him up. Or at least, not stop him. Laughter rippled around again. But it was thinner this time. Miles paused. He turned his head slowly, just enough to look at Chase. Not defiant. Not meek. Just present. His hands were calloused. His shoes were worn. He didn't carry a shred of threat. Yet somehow his silence made the moment uncomfortable. Celeste stepped forward. Wait. Her voice dropped like a stone into the crowd's shallow pond of attention. Chase raised an eyebrow. Wait. Let him try, she said, nodding toward Miles. A beat, then another. The entire ballroom felt it. Miles blinked. For the first time he looked at her. Really looked. Celeste saw something behind his gaze that startled her. A flicker of restrained fire, like someone who'd had everything beautiful ripped from his life and learned to survive without bitterness. Try, Chase laughed nervously. You want him to play? Why not?
You were joking about the marriage thing, right?
Celeste didn't answer. The air shifted. The security guard on standby stepped closer to Miles, eyes wary, fingers already twitching toward his radio. You here on a ticket? The guard asked. You got ID? I clean here, Miles said, voice low. Smooth. Southern. That don't mean you get to perform. I didn't ask to. But you want to, Celeste said. Miles hesitated. Then, yes ma'am. She turned to the guard. Let him sit. No offense, Miss Van Doren, but we've got protocol. I own the protocol. The guard backed off. Tension held the room hostage. Miles stepped toward the piano, moving like someone walking into a memory. He didn't carry the weight of a moment like this. He carried the weight of every moment that told him he didn't belong. Every sideways glance. Every silence. Every time his presence felt like an offense. He stood in front of the piano, let his hand brush the keys. Didn't sit. Not yet. A guest in the back muttered, "What's he gonna do? Play Twinkle Twinkle?" Celeste heard it. So did Miles. He sat, placed his fingers on the keys, and paused. The room held its breath. And then he didn't play. Not yet. His fingers hovered, like he was listening for something no one else could hear. The crowd leaned forward, waiting, expecting a joke, or a mess, or a sound that confirmed what they already believed, that he was the help, not the headline. But Celeste saw something no one else did. The way his shoulders squared. The way his eyes closed. Not out of fear, but focus. As if the moment had already happened in his mind 1,000 times. And just as the tension began to snap, he looked up at her and smiled. Subtle, sad, certain. Then, without a word, he pressed the first key. Celeste smirks, steps closer, and says softly, "Let the janitor try. What's the harm?" His fingers brushed the piano's surface like a ritual. But before the first note escaped, his mind drifted back to a time when music wasn't a spectacle, but a sanctuary. Back to Georgia. Not the Georgia of billboards and luxury ATL lounges, but the Georgia with rusted mailboxes, sun-baked porches, and a silence heavy enough to press down on a boy's chest. Miles Benton was 9 when he first touched real piano keys. They weren't ivory, they were plastic, cracked and faded from years of heat and ghostly gospel. The church was a leaning skeleton of a building, half its pews broken, its steeple bent like it had bowed in grief and never straightened up again. But it had a piano. An old upright Baldwin, rescued from a fire and reborn into ruin. His grandmother, Miss Odella, brought him there one humid afternoon, dragging him by the wrist after he got into trouble for humming in school again. "You got a noise in you," she told him, adjusting her wide-brimmed hat. "And it ain't going nowhere till it gets out right." That's how it started. That old church was the only place in Ellison Creek where a boy like Miles could make noise and not be told to hush. The first time he touched the keys, they stuck. The middle C wheezed. The A key never sounded the same twice. But still it was magic, and somehow he already knew where his fingers belonged. By age 11, he was playing full hymns. By 12, improvising. By 13, composing. He never read music the traditional way. He read moods. He read loss. He read silence. His father, Michael Benton Sr., was arrested when Miles was 7. charged with armed robbery at a liquor store 40 miles away, despite 3 eyewitnesses swearing he was at home fixing a neighbor's porch light at the time. A jury of 11 white jurors and 1 elderly black woman took just 4 hours to convict him. Life without parole. They said he had a history, but the only record Michael had was traffic tickets, and 1 dropped charge from a stop and frisk that never should have happened. Odella never cried in front of Miles, but every Saturday she'd dress in white, press a handkerchief into her Bible, and take him on the 3-hour bus ride to the prison. She'd sit tall, lips tight, and hold his father's hand through thick glass like it was the only thing tethering her to the world. That's where Miles learned that pain doesn't always come with shouting. Sometimes it hums. Low, relentless. By the time he turned 15, he was playing in local church services, weddings, even small recitals. The town whispered about him like he was a ghost story. That boy who makes a piano cry. A music teacher from Atlanta came to hear him play once. Took a video, sent it to a cousin who worked with Juilliard's outreach program. Letters came. Then a call. A recruiter offering a scholarship. They called him Prodigy. Miles didn't know the word, but it sounded like hope. But hope doesn't last long in towns like Ellison Creek, especially when you're black, gifted, and don't know your place. The fight broke out in gym class. 2 white seniors cornered a freshman skinny, dark, and new to the school. They called him Cotton Boy, laughed about picking season. One shoved him into a locker. The other spit. Miles was walking past with his headphones in. He could have kept walking. He didn't. He stepped between them, said back off. That was all, until one swung at him. Then the other. Miles didn't fight back. Not really. But he shoved one off, raised his arms, said, "I'm not trying to." By then, teachers had already rushed in. But when the smoke cleared, the bruises were on white skin. And the headlines wrote themselves. Local music student suspended for violent altercation. They found an old photo from when he was 12, frowning outside the prison during a visit. Blew it up on local news, cut it beside grainy hallway footage showing the aftermath, not the lead-up. The scholarship vanished in silence. No calls returned. No explanations. At 16, Miles stopped playing for a year. The church piano gathered dust. He refused to touch it, not because he couldn't, because it hurt too much. Adela never pushed him. Just left his sheet music folded on the pew each week. Never moved it. Never cleaned it. When he finally returned, it was on a Thursday morning, rain tapping the windows. He walked in quietly, sat at the bench, and played something no one had ever heard. It had no name, but Odella called it the sound of staying. Still, the damage had been done. Colleges passed. Jobs passed. Even the army recruiter said, "You got a record, son. Can't take chances." By 20, he was working odd jobs, dishwashing, warehouse lifting, moving carpets. Quiet, efficient, unseen. He moved to New York at 23, chasing nothing. Just a. He liked cleaning. Not because it was easy, but because no one asked questions. No one cared if he had scars or stories. They just cared that the mirrors shined, and the floor smelled like lemon. Music faded into memory. Until tonight. Until this moment. Back in the ballroom, his hands hovered over the keys, and suddenly he was that boy again, knees too close to the pedal, eyes closed, church ceiling leaking rainwater onto the pulpit. He was about to play. But then, a hand grabbed his shoulder. Firm. Invasive. A guard's voice. "That's enough. Step away from the piano." The room gasped. Not because of the interruption, but because of who dared touch him in that moment. Celeste turned sharply. "Don't." The guard didn't let go. "Ma'am, I was told to." "I don't care who told you. He's playing." Chase stepped forward now, his smile gone. "This is turning into a circus, Celeste." "It already was," she said, eyes locked on the guard's grip. "Let him go." "I don't think you understand," the guard began, before Celeste cut him off again. "I understand exactly. You saw a black man near a piano and assumed threat." A hush. Deadly. Cold. The room had no place to hide now. Celeste's voice dropped an octave. "Do it again and I'll have your badge off before dessert." The guard hesitated, released Miles's shoulder. Miles didn't move. He didn't flinch. He looked up at the guard, not with fear but with history. Then slowly, he placed his hands back on the keys. And this time he played. The first note rises, low, raw, and haunting. But across the room, Chase's face shifts. He whispers something into his phone and slips away. Miles didn't slam into the keys. He didn't showboat, didn't flutter his fingers, like the crowd might have expected from a man given sudden permission to shine. No, he sank into the bench, as if gravity pulled harder beneath him than anyone else. He let his fingers rest on the keys for half a second longer than necessary. Then, one note. Low. Singular. Honest. It wasn't pristine. It hummed a little off, like a scarred voice that had forgotten how to sing pretty. But it knew what pain was. Another note followed. Then another. No sheet music. No introduction. Just sound raw, aching, and alive. Conversations halted mid-sentence. Glasses hovered in midair, frozen inches from lips. Someone coughed, then covered their mouth like they'd interrupted a sermon. The clinking of silverware stopped entirely. The lights didn't dim, but they didn't need to. Because suddenly the only thing in the room that mattered was this. A man in janitor overalls bleeding beauty through a grand piano. The melody wasn't classical, not Bach, not Chopin. It wasn't even jazz in the traditional sense. It moved like memory, slipping between chords like someone afraid to stay too long in one place. It shifted time signatures without warning. One bar whispered grief, the next screamed injustice, the next curled into tenderness so vulnerable it almost embarrassed the room. It wasn't perfect, but it was devastating. Celeste didn't blink. She stood as if spellbound, her glass trembling in her hand. And somewhere in the back, Chase Langford scoffed under his breath and leaned toward a guest near him. "All right," he muttered. "We're really gonna act like this isn't just a polished street trick?" The guest didn't respond. He was too busy watching, listening, feeling. Chase tried again, louder this time. "It's a parlor trick. I mean, come on. You've seen YouTube. These guys practice one piece their whole lives just waiting to surprise people." Still, no one laughed. The moment refused to bend to cynicism. So Chase pulled out his phone and began recording, not because he was moved, but because everyone else was. Miles's hands moved faster now. Not violently, urgently. The chords bent, then twisted into a new progression. It was like the music was collapsing in on itself, then rebuilding into something more honest. He added dissonance, clashing notes that shouldn't live side by side, but somehow in his hands, they wept in harmony. His face remained still, his eyes closed, but his mouth parted slightly, like he was almost whispering each note before it played. No one dared speak. And yet the silence wasn't empty. It was holy. Even the waitstaff paused mid-stride. A tray of oysters hovered in the air. A wine glass wobbled on a silver platter but didn't fall. In the far corner, someone whispered, "Is this a known piece?" Another replied, "If it is, I've never heard it played like this." Celeste's chest rose and fell with every measure. She wasn't just hearing it, she was in it. Swallow. She remembered the mocking laughter. Chase's condescension. The press buzzing for a headline. All of it seemed impossibly small now. And then, Miles changed the key again. This time it wasn't just music. It was defiance. A musical middle finger. A confession. A resurrection. It sounded like the sound the soul makes when it's told it's not welcome, and then chooses to exist anyway. A woman in her 60s, old money likely, removed her glasses and wiped under her eyes. No one mocked her. Then came the crescendo. Not grandiose, but trembling. Like a man screaming into a pillow because the world doesn't hear him any other way. When Miles reached the final note, he didn't hold it. He let it go. Softly, almost like an apology. Then silence. Thick, wild, humbling silence. Not a soul clapped. Not because they didn't want to, but because no one wanted to be the one to break it. Celeste finally exhaled. Someone at the back began to applaud, slow, uncertain. Then another joined. Then the room erupted. Not in a cheer, but something warmer, earnest, disarmed. A rare kind of applause, the kind that says, "I didn't know I needed that." Cameras lifted. Phones recorded. Miles didn't flinch. He stood slowly, nodded once, and stepped away from the piano. Chase, ever needing control, forced a laugh. "Well, that was dramatic." Celeste didn't look at him. Chase pressed again. "I mean, the guy's got flair. I'll give him that. But let's not crown him Mozart just yet." Nobody laughed. The crowd's attention was still on Miles, who now stood near the exit, unsure of where to put his hands. A reporter near the bar whispered to another, "That's gotta go viral. That's a headline." From another cluster of guests. "He's not on the guest list, right? So who is he?" "Did you see her face?" someone added, referring to Celeste. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. And maybe she had. Because in that moment, Celeste wasn't thinking about the gala, or the brand partnerships, or even her father's expectations. She was thinking about the boy she used to be, back when she played cello in her room at night, to drown out the sound of her parents fighting through the walls. She was thinking about art. Real art.
The kind you don't schedule. The kind that shows up.
A journalist from the New York Herald approached her, voice low. "Ms. Van Doren, care to comment?" Celeste didn't answer. She walked slowly, deliberately toward Miles. But before she could reach him, a woman near the center of the room stood up suddenly. Mid-60s, regal posture, half-moon spectacles perched on her nose. She pressed her hand to her chest and whispered, "That melody, isn't that a lost Bernstein variation?" A wave of murmurs surged. "What did she say?" someone asked. "Bernstein? As in Leonard?" No, she's mistaken. That's not even the right structure." But the older woman shook her head. "I'm not wrong," she said, louder now. "I heard it once, 40 years ago. It was unfinished. He played it in a private rehearsal before it was scrapped." Chase scoffed again. "So now the janitor's resurrecting lost symphonies?" The woman turned sharply. "I knew Bernstein. I taught his unpublished scores. That melody wasn't mimicry. It was a thread expanded, built out. And whoever he is, he didn't just play it. He completed it." The room broke into hushed chaos. Someone was already Googling lost Bernstein piece. A producer from a streaming network started typing a note in her phone. Several people pulled out business cards. Miles stood still, unreadable. He hadn't expected praise. Certainly not this. Celeste looked at him like she was seeing something for the first time. And she was. Not a janitor. Not even a pianist. But a truth the world had tried to scrub away. And across the ballroom, unnoticed by all, Chase Langford slipped out a side door, still on his phone. His voice was low, agitated. "Yeah, we've got a situation. Send me everything you can find on him. Arrest records, school files, family history. If he's gonna hijack the narrative, he better be spotless. Because if not, I'm making sure he never plays another damn note again." It started with a single video. Shaky, vertical, grainy, just a janitor at a piano in a tuxedo-filled ballroom. Then came a second angle. Then a third. Within an hour, the clip had migrated from group chats to Reddit threads, Twitter timelines, and TikTok's For You page, like it had been waiting in the shadows for its moment. By morning, it had gone viral. But virality never comes clean. At first, the world was enchanted. The headlines glowed. "Unknown janitor stuns billionaire gala with piano performance. Mystery maestro leaves NYC's elite speechless. Who is Miles Benton?" The video gathered 8 million views in under 12 hours. Dozens of musicians reposted it. Music theory. YouTubers broke down the chord progressions like gospel. One classical pianist claimed, "That man didn't just play music, he played truth." The footage showed everything. The derision before the performance, the silence during, the stunned applause after, and most important, the look on Celeste Van Doren's face, that stunned, shattered awe. For a moment, it felt like the world had paused just to witness a man be brilliant. But moments don't last online. By the second day, the tone shifted. A conservative influencer with 3 million followers tweeted, "Something smells fake. Janitor just happens to sit at a Steinway and drop a Bernstein variation. Staged. Woke bait." Right-wing media outlets followed suit. Viral piano janitor. Emotional hoax or PR stunt. Meet the real Miles Benton. Troubled past. Manufactured fame. They didn't have to look far to start the smear. Someone found an old mugshot. Miles at 16, looking scared. Lips pressed tight. Eyes swollen from tears he'd refused to shed. The headline didn't mention that he'd been defending a freshman from a racist assault. It simply said, "Teen arrested in school altercation." That was all the internet needed. Memes surfaced. Ugly ones. A piano photoshopped into a prison yard. A spray bottle turned into a microphone. Captions like, "When you clean floors by day and fool liberals by night." Then came the false facts. He was hired by Celeste's PR team. He's not even a janitor. The video was pre-recorded. The music was dubbed over. Even though none of it was true, algorithms didn't care about truth. And neither did Chase Langford, who watched the backlash unfold with a smile in his eyes and a cold brew in his hand. He didn't start the fire. He just fed it. Behind the scenes, He made sure the mugshot trended. Paid a digital team to push fraud janitor to the top of Instagram's Explore page. Quietly sent screenshots of Miles's juvenile record. Sealed but not hard to access if you knew the right political donors in Georgia. Celeste didn't know any of that yet. She only knew the video made her cry on the second watch. Not because of the music, though that still pierced her, but because of how still Miles had been afterward. How lost he'd looked as people applauded. As if he hadn't expected it. As if he didn't trust it. She tried to reach out. She contacted the hotel staff. No one gave her a last name. She asked the gala's organizers. They hadn't hired him. He worked for the cleaning subcontractor. An out-of-state company with a disconnected phone number and no online footprint. Gone. He had vanished, just as easily as he appeared. She didn't know what scared her more. That someone with so much soul could disappear, or that no one else seemed to care. Meanwhile, the internet ran wild. Comment sections filled with coded venom. Amazing performance. Too bad he's a criminal. Bet he stole that piano too. Next time, just let the waiters do a tap dance. A black violinist with 500,000 followers tweeted in frustration. Y'all uplift us when we're magical, but never when we're human. Another chimed in. We're allowed to inspire, never to exist. Some people fought back. They posted threads defending Miles, unraveling the smear campaign. They shared the full context, the background, the music. They tried to humanize him. But the damage was done, and then on the third day, someone leaked the email. It appeared on Twitter without warning. A screenshot of a corporate memo from Tricor Services, time-stamped just 5 hours after the gala. Subject line: Urgent disruption at Van Doren Gala. The body of the email was short and surgical. Effective immediately, Miles Benton is terminated from his assignment at the Crescent Regency. We will not tolerate breaches of professionalism, regardless of external circumstances. Media exposure cannot excuse protocol violations. Please ensure his badge access is revoked by EOD. The attachment: a photo of Miles's employee ID blurred except for his name. The tweet simply read, "This is how America treats black genius." The post hit 500K likes in 2 hours. Then 1.2 million. News outlets couldn't ignore it now. MSNBC ran a segment titled, "From Janitor to Viral Star." Then fired. And NPR chimed in. Miles Benton, and the cost of black visibility. Celeste sat on her kitchen floor, scrolling the feed at 2:13 a.m., hands shaking. She had power, so much power, but none of it could stop what had already happened. She had lifted him into the spotlight, and then watched silently as it scorched him. She pulled up her contacts, drafted a press statement, deleted it, wrote again, deleted again. She didn't want to make it about her. But wasn't it already? Her words, her challenge, her stage, her silence. Meanwhile, in a church basement uptown, Miles watched the chaos unfold on someone else's phone. He didn't have a smartphone. He didn't have much of anything. Just a duffel bag. And his silence. He said nothing as the volunteer shelter coordinator showed him the tweet. Said nothing when the others in the shelter, mostly black and brown, mostly invisible, gave him nods of respect, or pity. He didn't want either. He hadn't asked for fame. He just wanted to play. But the world didn't want that. It wanted blood. Or brilliance. But never both in the same body. He laid back on the thin cot, closed his eyes and tried to remember what it had felt like to press that first note. Before the applause. Before the cameras. Before the world recognized him only to devour him. And somewhere, in an editorial office across town, a fact-checker stumbled across something odd in the Tricor systems. Something no one had noticed yet. The HR manager who signed the termination memo. He'd been inactive for 6 months, on administrative leave. The signature was fake. The email wasn't sent from an official server. And the attached ID? It had been lifted from an internal database the week before the gala. Which meant someone wanted Miles gone before he ever sat down at that piano. The tweet leaks into mainstream news. Breaking. Fired janitor's termination email was forged. Who's behind it? The press conference was scheduled for 11 a.m. sharp. By 9:30, reporters were already staking out front row seats at the downtown Manhattan event space Celeste Van Doren had rented for the day. Sleek floor-to-ceiling windows, minimalist floral arrangements, cameras lined like rifles across the back wall. Even before the microphones were tested, the headlines had already been written. Heiress responds to piano janitor scandal. Van Doren apologizes too little too late. $100 K mea culpa, PR stunt or redemption. The news cycle was ravenous. Everyone wanted a side to choose. Was Celeste a hero turned villain trying to make things right? Or a manipulator laundering her image through tears and checkbooks? Her PR team urged her to stay controlled. No improvising, they warned. Speak your truth, but don't let it become about you. The contradiction hovered heavy. Celeste ignored the rehearsals. She hadn't slept in 2 nights. She didn't care how she looked. She only knew the silence from Miles. The fact that he hadn't answered her calls, hadn't acknowledged her messages, hadn't even acknowledged her. It hurt more than she expected. She took the stage wearing a cream blouse, no jewelry, no makeup except for under-eye concealer. Her hair was pulled back, vulnerable, but clean. The look of someone prepared to face consequence, at least cosmetically. Flashes went off the second she stepped behind the podium. The room fell into hush. Celeste took a breath. I want to speak today, not as a Van Doren, not as a businesswoman or social figure, she began, voice calm low, but as a person who got it wrong. She paused, scanned the room, let the tension settle. At the gala last week, I made a foolish comment. I used the language of marriage as a dare, as a spectacle, and when someone Miles Benton met, that challenge with something real, the world saw what I hadn't, not just talent, but dignity. A few cameras clicked louder, reporters nodded, pens scratching. She continued, I never should have framed something so sacred as a bet. And I certainly never imagined the kind of backlash Miles would face. That backlash was cruel, racist, and deeply un-American, and while I did not cause it, I recognize my privilege helped ignite it. That part was coached, but her throat caught anyway, because somewhere deep down, it was hers. She reached into her pocket, pulled out a folded check. $100,000, she said, holding it up. That's what I'm offering Miles Benton today. Not as a payout, but as a first step toward correcting a wrong, toward restoring his peace, his privacy and his power. Murmurs rolled through the room. Then she added, quietly, he refused to attend today, and I respect that. But this is for him, wherever he is. Then came the question she hadn't planned for. Miss Van Doren, a reporter from the Times stood up. Are you doing this for him, or for yourself? Another followed. Do you think offering a check absolves you of responsibility? A third. You went viral for elevating a black artist. Now you're trending again for exploiting him. Do you believe you're being punished for kindness, or for clout? Her throat tightened. Celeste stepped back from the mic. Her eyes moistened. But the tears weren't rehearsed. They cracked from something deeper. Something knotted. I didn't ask for this story to become mine, she said, voice breaking slightly. But I will not hide from it. I don't want pity. I want Miles to know he matters. The conference ended in a cascade of confusion. Some reporters clapped. Others muttered. The internet split within minutes. That was real. You could feel it. So she cried on camera. Big whoop. She made it about her again. $100 K can't buy back dignity. And while the world dissected her motives, Miles watched it all from the corner of a homeless shelter in Harlem, sitting on a faded leather couch beside a broken vending machine. The room smelled like Lysol and day-old coffee. A small flat-screen TV sat mounted on the wall, volume low, but not low enough to miss her voice. He watched her hand hold up the check, watched her say his name. He didn't flinch, but inside something collapsed. Not because he hated her, but because it was kindness, and it still hurt. The whole world had reduced him to a symbol. A moment, a movement, and now, a charity case. The other men in the shelter gave him space. Some had seen the video, others didn't know who he was, but there was a gravity around him now, like grief worn too long. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the folded paper Celeste's assistant had slipped to him 2 nights ago. The check was still crisp. He tore it in half. Then again, until it was confetti. Respect's not a currency, he muttered. The shelter coordinator, a gentle man in his 50s named Curtis, approached with a tray of sandwiches. That was you on the screen, huh? Miles didn't answer. Curtis placed the tray down, sat across from him. World's funny, he said. Build you up for one song, burn you down before the echo fades. Miles finally looked up. I never asked for the stage. Curtis smiled sadly. Doesn't matter. You sang something true. That always costs. He patted Miles's shoulder and walked away. That night Miles couldn't sleep. The cot felt like concrete, the air too dry, his thoughts too loud. He slipped outside before dawn, walked 6 blocks under amber streetlights, until he found a park bench beneath a broken lamp. He sat in silence, hands in pockets, mind replaying every frame of the video. And then, a voice behind him. "Beautiful morning, isn't it?" Miles turned. A man stood a few feet away. Early 60s, neatly dressed in a tailored charcoal suit, shined shoes, a cane that didn't seem necessary but added presence. His eyes were unreadable, calm, but not passive. Miles narrowed his gaze. "You lost." The man chuckled softly. "No, I've been looking for you." Miles stood halfway. "Who sent you?" The man stepped closer, unthreatening. He reached into his coat, pulled out a white card, and handed it to him. "Samuel Elias, Artistic Director, House of Resonance. No website, just an address in Harlem." "My boss," the man said gently, "wants to meet the man who silenced a room." The card in Miles's hand felt heavier than its weight. Plain white, black serif font. No slogan, no social handles, just a name. Samuel Elias. Beneath it, an address. Harlem. No zip code, no phone number. The man who handed it to him, Samuel himself, waited, still as the dawn. The park around them was nearly empty, save for a few pigeons pecking at nothing, and the occasional jogger giving them a wide berth. "I don't take meetings with ghosts," Miles said finally. Samuel didn't smile. "Neither do I. You're real. That's the point." "You said someone sent you." "I said my boss wants to meet you. That boss is me." Samuel shifted the cane slightly, using it to guide himself to the bench. He sat with precise motion, confident, though his eyes were cloudy with fog. Forgive the poetic delivery. Old habits die hard. Miles stared. "You blind?" "Mostly," Samuel said. "Not enough to forget what greatness sounds like." "You saw the video?" Samuel chuckled. Dry, warm. "Son, I heard it." That answer paused Miles for a moment. Something about the tone, about the certainty, cut through his instinct to walk away. "I'm not performing," Miles muttered. "Not again." Samuel tilted his head, like listening for what Miles wasn't saying. "I didn't ask you to. I'm offering something else." Miles scoffed. "A check? A shout-out? You want to be the next white guy who—" "I'm not white." That stopped him. He looked again. Samuel's skin was brown, with olive undertones, aged like wood, hair salt and pepper under a black beret. Miles had been too tired, too guarded, to really see him before. "My mother was Creole, my father Syrian. Harlem raised me, and I don't want your name. I want to give you back your music." A beat. Miles sat slowly. "You run a church?" "No," Samuel said. "A sanctuary." He pulled a battered violin case from beside the bench. The hinges were rusted, one latch broken. A sticker half peeled from the side read "Juilliard, Class of—" Miles glanced at it. "That yours?" "Used to be," Samuel said. "It doesn't sing anymore." "Neither do I." The violin inside was chipped, one string missing. The bow rested in 2 pieces, taped at the center. Samuel traced a finger over it, then closed the case again. "Come with me," he said. "Just once. No promises." Miles hesitated. "I've had promises," he murmured. "They all came with terms." "This doesn't," Samuel replied. "But it does come with people. People like you." That last part lingered. Miles finally stood. The building looked like it should have been condemned. Brick half covered in graffiti, one boarded window, a side door with no label. But inside, the air was alive. Sound bled through the walls. Scales, chords, fragments of songs half-born and desperate to live. They stepped into a hallway covered with mismatched flyers and Polaroids. Black kids with saxophones, brown girls at drum kits, trans vocalists with sheet music folded into their back pockets. Some faces looked defiant, others broken. All were talented. Samuel tapped a rhythm against the wall with his cane. 3 fast knocks, 2 slow. The door opened. A woman in locks, maybe late 20s, squinted at Miles. "He the one, I'm the one," Samuel said. She stepped aside. They entered what once might have been a warehouse but was now an underground music school. No uniforms, no grades, no lectures, just expression. Cords draped across the floors. Soundproof panels leaned on cracked walls. A busted chandelier hung sideways over a room with mismatched couches, upright pianos, turntables, violins, and MPCs. Every corner buzzed. Samuel raised a hand. Everyone, quiet. The music paused, not instantly, but respectfully. Eyes turned. Dozens of them. Young, old, liminal. A short Dominican teen, with gold hoops whispered, "That's the guy from the video." Someone clapped once, then more. Miles stepped back. Samuel raised his voice. "He doesn't need your applause. He needs your understanding." Silence again. Samuel guided Miles into a side room. Inside, 4 upright pianos faced each other like a circle of elders. One was missing 2 keys. Another had graffiti etched across the wood. "No one owns music." Miles ran his hand along one of the keys. "This place was built by ghosts," Samuel said. "Musicians the world used, then discarded. We train here, we fight here. Not for fame, for reclamation." Miles sat, and for the first time since the gala, his fingers touched keys without fear. He didn't play, but he felt. "Why me?" he asked. Samuel leaned against the doorframe. "Because you made them listen. Without spectacle, without apology." He turned slightly. "I taught at Juilliard for 12 years. Wrote symphonies. Premiered at Kennedy Hall. Then my hearing started to fade. So did the invitations. You went blind." Samuel nodded. "And they called it an end. You stopped?" "I was stopped." A long pause. "Music isn't about hearing," Samuel said. "It's about remembering. You remember pain in a way the world tried to erase." Miles swallowed. "They still trying. Let them try." Samuel stepped closer. "You're not the first genius they tried to mop away," he said. Then softer, "But we're going to change that." From the hallway, a student rushes in, holding a tablet. "He's trending again," she gasps. But this time, it's Celeste hadn't visited her mother's brownstone in over 3 years. The silence between them had calcified into something sturdy, an unspoken truce carved from old wounds. But tonight, she needed more than distance. She needed truth, so she climbed the narrow stone steps alone, her heels clicking like a countdown, her pulse thudding beneath her ribs. The door opened before she could knock. Evelyn Van Doren stood tall and composed, draped in a gray cashmere robe, pearls around her neck like punctuation marks. Her expression was neutral, elegance sharpened by disappointment. "You look exhausted," she said. Instead of "hello, nice to see you too," Celeste muttered. Inside, the house was as immaculate as ever. The same silver-framed magazine covers lined the hallway. The same arrangement of untouched first editions, stacked for effect. The living room air smelled faintly of lemon polish and expectations. "Tea?" Evelyn asked, already walking toward the kitchen. "I'm not here to be soothed." "I assumed as much," her mother replied calmly. Celeste sat on the velvet couch, perching as if she didn't trust the furniture not to swallow her. Her fingers were restless, picking at the seam of her coat. She didn't know where to begin, so she jumped in. "I need to tell you something. It's about the gala." Evelyn reappeared with 2 porcelain cups, placing one down without comment. "The Marry the Musician bit wasn't spontaneous," Celeste said. "It was a PR stunt. I made it up on the spot to tank the engagement." Evelyn raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. "I panicked," Celeste went on. "I knew the cameras were there. I thought if I turned it into a viral moment, I could kill the chase story before the media wedding machine locked me in." "And the janitor?" Celeste flinched. "He wasn't supposed to matter. He showed up. He played, and suddenly it wasn't a stunt anymore." "So you exploited him," Evelyn said plainly. "I didn't mean to, but I did. I see that now." Silence stretched between them. "He saved me from my own performance," Celeste admitted. "And I left him out there, to be mocked, torn apart, fired, just so I could step back and act kind." Evelyn sipped her tea, eyes narrowed in thought. "I thought you were smarter than that," she said eventually. "But I suppose you had to learn how public guilt works." Celeste stood abruptly, pacing. "It's more than guilt." I dug into his past. That made her mother pause. "You what?" "I hired a private investigator," Celeste said. "Not to dig dirt, to understand what happened to him, who he was before the meme." She pulled a thick folder from her purse and laid it on the coffee table. "His name is Miles Benton. He grew up in Georgia. He was a prodigy, had a full ride offer to a conservatory until it was revoked." Evelyn frowned. "Why?" Celeste opened the folder. "He intervened in a school fight. Protected another student from getting jumped. The board labeled him unstable and disqualified him from scholarship." She handed over a photocopy. Evelyn scanned it quickly. Displays unpredictable emotional behavior. Not a candidate for higher education advancement. Two board members emailed each other. Celeste added. They were worried about public optics and avoidance of affirmative action controversy. They used coded language, but it's clear they didn't want another gifted black boy in the headlines. Evelyn's expression darkened. And this? She asked, tapping the document. Real. I checked sources, multiple confirmations. And you're telling me this because I leaked it. Anonymously. Ellen leaned back in her chair. You do realize the implications of that? I do. You've exposed yourself to political enemies, corporate enemies, even legal retaliation. I know. Celeste's voice didn't shake now, but he deserves justice. Even if it's only a sliver. Her mother tilted her head. And you think martyrdom earns you redemption? No, Celeste said quietly. But silence doesn't either. She gathered the folder, sliding it back into her coat. Evelyn studied her like she was trying to see her daughter for the first time in years. Your father would have spun this better, she said. He also would have ignored it, Celeste replied. Evelyn didn't argue. As Celeste reached the door, her mother spoke once more. This will not make you a hero. Celeste turned. I don't want to be a hero, she said. I just want to do something right. Outside, the wind sliced colder than before. She climbed into her car, clutching her phone, feeling like something irreversible had begun. That night, she uploaded the files to a secure leak site. She included a message. This isn't a whistleblow. It's a confession. I helped silence someone who deserved a future. Here's what the system did to him before I ever had the chance. She didn't sign it, but she didn't hide the metadata either. The journalist she sent it to was fearless. A young black woman named Imani Kersey, with a track record for exposing educational injustice. Within 6 hours, the story hit the front page of her site. They took his music before he ever played a note. The Miles Benton files. Screenshots spread like wildfire. TikTok creators dissected the email trails. Activists rallied behind it. Celebrities posted vague calls for accountability. Celeste watched from her apartment in silence. As headlines evolved. Exposed. Georgia school buried black prodigy's future. Affirmative action risk. How a gifted teen was erased by white optics. Her inbox filled with support and hate in equal measure. Sponsors paused partnerships. Her father's boardroom called emergency meetings. And then at 2:14 a.m., her phone lit up. Unknown number. One message. Nice leak. Cute conscience. Let's see how brave you are when your secrets hit the front page. Celeste froze. The room was dark. The hum of the fridge the only sound. Another message came in. A screenshot. Her private email. One she hadn't used since college. One tied to the Chase contract. Ever seen what a non-disclosure clause looks like when it's weaponized? Celeste stared at the screen, heart racing, as she realized someone had hacked into her past. And they weren't just coming for her reputation. They were coming for her life. The recital was never supposed to be more than a whisper. It was hosted in a converted basement of a Harlem community arts center. A room that still smelled faintly of paint and dust, with folding chairs arranged in a semicircle around a baby grand piano that had seen better decades. There was no stage, no spotlight, just voices bouncing off concrete, and a piano's ghost waiting to breathe. Samuel Elias stood by the door, cane in one hand, a discreet earpiece in the other, his head tilted toward the echo of the crowd filtering in, quiet anticipation. A few names he recognized in the buzz. An R&B singer with 3 million followers, a famous jazz trumpeter in low-key attire, a producer known for sampling obscure soul riffs into Grammy-nominated records. He turned toward Miles, who was pacing slowly in the back, fingers clenching and unclenching. You don't have to do this, Samuel said gently. Miles didn't answer. His eyes were on the piano, but his mind was miles away. You do this, Samuel continued, and they'll stop treating you like a mystery. You'll be real, which means they'll come harder. Miles nodded slowly. I'm not playing for them, he said. I'm playing for him. Samuel didn't ask who. He already knew. The audience wasn't massive, just under 60 people. But it felt larger because of who they were. Half were known for what they created. The other half for how loudly they could share it. Phones were tucked away for now. But that wouldn't last. Not if Miles played like he had that night at the gala. Samuel stepped to the front, clearing his throat. Good evening, he began, his voice low and deliberate. You've all heard the clips. You've seen the headlines. You think you know what to expect. A pause. You don't. He gestured to the piano. Please welcome, Miles Benton. There was no applause, just an almost reverent silence. Miles walked out, dressed in a dark linen shirt and slacks, simple, loose, clean, his hair tied back. No performance smile, no charm, just presence. He sat at the piano, adjusted the bench slightly, and rested his hands in his lap for a moment longer than expected. Then he spoke. I wrote this 2 years ago, he said softly, but I've never played it out loud, not until now. He looked at the keys. It's called Letters My Father Couldn't Read. And then he played. The first note was low, hesitant, like a sentence unsure of itself. Then a second, climbing just slightly. Then a third that bent into dissonance, like a mispronounced word in a love letter. The melody didn't declare itself. It remembered itself. The room leaned in. Miles's body swayed slightly, but his face remained still. His fingers worked with careful urgency, painting grief, longing, pride, all wordless but exact. The middle section rose, brighter, quicker, with flashes of hope hidden in minor keys, as if trying to build a world where freedom was possible, where a son could talk to his father without walls or wires between them. Then came the descent. Slower now. A single repeated phrase in the left hand, like the ticking of a visitation clock. The right hand layered a sorrow, so personal it scraped bone. It wasn't just sadness, it was a lullaby for the incarcerated, a requiem for stolen years. And then he stopped. No final note, no flourish, just the sudden brutal end of silence. The room didn't clap at first. It breathed. Several audience members were in tears. Others sat with their eyes closed, hands pressed against their hearts like trying to hold something inside. Samuel remained still, his chin slightly raised, as if memorizing the last vibration in the air. Then the applause came, not loud but overwhelming, like a wall collapsing into worship. The moment didn't just land, it sank. Phones came out instantly, clips uploaded within minutes. One video hit 1.2 million views before the recital even ended. Comments flooded in. I've never cried at a piano solo before. This isn't music, it's memory. Free his father. Free them all. A trending hashtag emerged before midnight. Letters My Father Couldn't Read. Miles stood, nodded once in thanks, and walked off stage like he was leaving a confession booth. Backstage, Samuel was waiting. You did more than play, he said quietly. You opened something. Miles didn't respond. His hands were still shaking. Meanwhile, on the 43rd floor of a high-rise office in Tribeca, Chase Langford hurled his phone across the room. It shattered against the wall, spraying glass like fireworks. Turn it off, he barked at his assistant. Mute every goddamn mention. But sir, mute it. Archive it. Scrub it. Chase was supposed to be celebrating tonight. A soft launch of his new crypto-funded music platform. A sleek initiative designed to give unheard voices a place to shine. A hollow pitch for investors. But now, Miles Benton had hijacked the narrative. Again. Chase paced, breathing hard, jaw clenched. The recital was trending on 5 platforms. Celeste had disappeared from the public eye since the leak. Sponsors were ghosting him. He'd spent weeks trying to bury Miles in digital noise, and instead the man was being reborn in sound. He opened a private folder on his laptop, titled Janitor, Raw Dirt. Inside were files he'd compiled through hired digital forensics teams, sealed juvenile records, court transcripts, grainy footage from the school hallway fight, and most importantly, a whisper campaign toolkit. Hashtags, suggested captions, comment bots programmed to subtly discredit. He hovered over the folder, then opened another, Van Doren Assets. This one was colder, full of screenshots, emails, one in particular, an unsigned prenup draft, with notes in Celeste's private email font, the kind of file that could be spun to say anything. Chase didn't just want Miles ruined, he wanted them both obliterated. He picked up his phone, dialed a private number. A voice answered. Ready? Chase stared out at the Manhattan skyline. It's time. Across the city, an anonymous post hits the dark web. Exclusive coming truth about Janitor fame. Real story. Real agenda. 24 hours. 3 days after the Harlem recital, Miles Benton was no longer just a musician. He was a headline. A movement. A face of what it meant to rise from invisibility and shake the ceiling with nothing but sound. Letters My Father Couldn't Read wasn't just a composition anymore. It was a protest anthem. Teens used it as a backdrop for social justice edits. Teachers played it in classrooms. Inmates in Rikers were granted a radio hour to hear it on loop. Celebrities praised it. Activists reposted it. The entire culture shifted just a degree in his direction. And then the world reminded him exactly who he was. It happened on a quiet Tuesday evening, just outside a youth music workshop in East Harlem. The sun had barely dipped. Miles stepped outside the venue alone, hoodie up, hands in his jacket pockets, taking a breath before the next session. He didn't even hear the cruiser until it pulled up against the curb. Two officers stepped out quickly. One was already unhooking the cuffs from his belt. "You match a suspect description," the taller one said flatly. Miles blinked. "I'm a music teacher. I'm supposed to be." "Hands where we can see them." The other snapped. "I'm not resisting," Miles replied, voice calm. "I'm just—" Before he could finish, they rushed him. One behind, one at his side. A phone camera nearby captured everything. His hands in the air, his body still, his words steady, and then the tackle. His face smashed against pavement, one officer's knee pinning his back, the other yanking his wrist hard enough to sprain. The video was 32 seconds long, but it would take over the internet in less than 5 minutes. The hashtags came first. Miles Benton. From music to mugshots. This is why we kneel. The clip played on loop across Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. There was no ambiguity, no context needed. Just a black man complying, thrown to the concrete anyway. News anchors didn't need to ask if it was police brutality. This time, the footage was the answer. On CNN, a civil rights attorney said, "Miles Benton is not just a musician, he's a mirror, and what we're seeing reflected is centuries of criminalization for simply existing." The NYPD issued a statement by midnight. The individual was approached due to matching an active suspect description. "We are reviewing the incident." It was the kind of cold, detached language built to diffuse outrage. But it didn't work. The clip spread faster. People protested outside the precinct by morning. Op-eds flooded in. From genius to suspect in 72 hours. Black excellence is always on borrowed time. And then came the pushback. Anonymous accounts flooded the comments. "How do we know it wasn't him? Stop making every arrest about race. If he wasn't guilty, why didn't he just explain himself?" It didn't matter how many people saw the truth. The damage was already seeping in. Celeste watched the video alone. She had spent the last few days dodging media, enduring corporate silence, and questioning her own impact. But when she saw Miles's face slammed against the concrete, something primal inside her surged. She picked up her phone and called her publicist. "Draft a statement. Short. No corporate language. Celeste," the woman warned, "your brand's still recovering. Sponsors are nervous. Some— I don't care." The statement went live within the hour. There is no excuse. There is no misunderstanding. Miles Benton is not a threat. He is a musician, a friend, and a man whose dignity was violated. I stand with him, loudly. The internet erupted. Her fan base split. One half rallied behind her. The other turned. Why make this political? So now she's the savior again. Didn't she cause all this to begin with? And lurking beneath the noise, Chase Langford's fingerprints. He unleashed his digital team. Paid bot farms. Coordinated smear replies.
Bet she's doing this because she wants him.
You don't suddenly become an ally when the camera's off. He's a janitor. Let's stop pretending he's Mandela. But then an unexpected twist. A Reddit post surfaced, claiming to be from an NYPD insider. That arrest? Not a coincidence. He was flagged days ago. Someone pulled internal access. Attached were screenshots, blurred but damning. A terminal screen showing Miles's name. An internal tag labeled "Observation, Potential Civil Unrest Risk." Not just stopped. Targeted. Celeste stared at the screen, nausea rising in her throat. She forwarded it to Imani Kersey, the journalist who had broken Miles's school board story. Within minutes, Imani called. "If this is real," she said, voice low, "they weren't just scared of him. They planned this. Can we prove it? I'm already chasing the access logs. But this isn't small time. If someone flagged him through that system, it was high clearance. Connected." Celeste exhaled sharply. Her mind flashed to something her father once told her. Power doesn't punish threats, it erases them. Miles was released without charges the next day.
No apology.
No statement. Just a bruised shoulder, a torn hoodie, and a silence too loud to ignore. Samuel waited outside the precinct, leaning against a borrowed sedan, the engine running. Miles stepped into the passenger seat. Without a word. They didn't speak until the bridge. You okay? Samuel asked gently. Miles stared straight ahead. They didn't want justice, he said. They wanted optics. They wanted me cuffed in daylight. Samuel tightened his grip on the wheel. You still have your music. Do I? Miles whispered. Or is that next? That night, Celeste received a letter. It wasn't an email. It wasn't a text. A man in a gray hoodie dropped it through the mail slot of her penthouse door. Inside was a single sheet of thick paper, typed in bold black letters. Back off, or the janitor won't be the only one losing everything. Her hands shook as she turned the page over. Taped to the back was a printed photo taken at the gala. Her and Miles, standing side by side, a red ink circle drawn around them. A second message, scrawled in pen at the bottom. You forgot who writes the music. Celeste sinks to the floor, heart pounding, as she realizes this isn't just about Miles anymore. It's about erasing everyone who tried to help him speak. 10. When wealth isn't protection. Word count. The threats stopped being anonymous when the money began to vanish. In the span of 6 days, Celeste lost 5 sponsorship deals, 2 brand collaborations, and her seat on the board of her father's media foundation. The polite emails came first, all coded in vague phrases like realigning with our values and pausing our partnerships in light of recent events. By the 7th email, they stopped pretending. You're too polarizing now. We're pulling the campaign. Then came the headlines. Celeste Van Doren, heiress or instigator. Socialite defends criminal pianist. Cost herself millions. She watched it all unfold from the floor of her once impeccable penthouse, surrounded by half-packed boxes, and silence that pressed against the glass windows like a tide waiting to break through. Her father called on the 4th day. You need to walk this back, he said, without a greeting. Publicly, say you were manipulated. Say you're distancing yourself. I'm not, Celeste replied. You think this is noble? Because it's suicidal. I think I'm finally doing something that matters. There was a long pause on the line. I'm freezing your trust fund, he said coldly. You want to play activist? Do it without my money. She didn't speak. Do you hear me? I do, she said. And I don't care. He hung up. That night her doorman stopped calling her Miss Van Doren. Her elevator keycard failed. The building manager said he couldn't protect her privacy from the press anymore. Paparazzi waited outside the entrance. 2 had already followed her to a bodega and back. 1 chased her cab for 9 blocks. When she returned from groceries the next evening, a notice was taped to her door. Eviction proceedings initiated. Violation of contract clause. Tenant conduct resulting in reputational harm to the property. She laughed. A hollow, disbelieving sound. The penthouse was paid in full, but reputation, it seemed, cost more than rent. Miles came to see her the following night, entering through the back stairwell like a ghost avoiding the spotlight. He wore the same gray hoodie from the day he was arrested. His eyes were tired, but not dim. She opened the door, and he stood there with his hands in his pockets, like he didn't know if he was welcome. You shouldn't be here, she said. I know. They'll use it against you, against us. I know. They stared at each other, the silence heavy with everything unspoken. She stepped aside. He entered. The apartment was stripped of its polish, framed awards boxed, designer furniture sold. Only the piano remained, centered like a relic she refused to part with. Miles looked at it, then at her. They're not going to stop, he said softly. Not until you're dust. Then they'll have to sweep me too. He frowned. I can go. No. You don't need to burn for me. I'm not burning, she said. I'm waking up. He sat on the edge of the couch, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. They're calling you my lover now, he muttered. That I manipulated you. Slept my way into pity. I saw the DMs. He looked up sharply. She nodded. They're fake. I know. You don't write like that. You don't speak like that. Miles closed his eyes. Chase, he said. Yeah. People believe it? Half the internet, she said. Which half? The loud one. Miles exhaled. I can disappear, he said. Make this easier. She walked over and knelt in front of him. Don't you dare. He looked at her, surprised. I mean it, she whispered. You didn't come this far just to vanish again. Let them come. Let them smear us. But don't let them erase you. I'm not scared for me, he said. I'm scared for what they'll do to you. She smiled. Tired. Fierce. I've already lost everything that doesn't matter. The next morning, A black SUV parked outside her building. A man in a crisp suit approached her on the sidewalk. He held out a card. Daybreak Studios. National syndicated talk. Live. We want both of you, he said. One chair. One story. Unfiltered. She blinked. Live. Yes.
Why?
Because the world wants to see the truth. Raw. Together. No edits. One shot. Celeste looked at the card, then at the man. Are you sure it's not a trap? He smiled. If it is, it'll be televised. That night, Miles receives a private message. Go on that show and the video from Georgia goes live. All of it. The threats stopped being anonymous when the money began to vanish. In the span of 6 days, Celeste lost 5 sponsorship deals, 2 brand collaborations, and her seat on the board of her father's media foundation. The polite emails came first, all coded in vague phrases like realigning with our values and pausing our partnerships in light of recent events. By the 7th email, they stopped pretending. You're too polarizing now. We're pulling the campaign. Then came the headlines. Celeste Van Doren, heiress or instigator. Socialite defends criminal pianist. Costs herself millions. She watched it all unfold from the floor of her once impeccable penthouse, surrounded by half-packed boxes and silence that pressed against the glass windows like a tide waiting to break through. Her father called on the 4th day. You need to walk this back, he said, without a greeting. Publicly. Say you were manipulated. Say you're distancing yourself. I'm not, Celeste replied. You think this is noble? Because it's suicidal. I think I'm finally doing something that matters. There was a long pause on the line. I'm freezing your trust fund, he said coldly. You want to play activist, do it without my money. She didn't speak. Do you hear me? I do, she said. And I don't care. He hung up. That night, her doorman stopped calling her Miss Van Doren. Her elevator keycard failed. The building manager said he couldn't protect her privacy from the press anymore. Paparazzi waited outside the entrance. 2 had already followed her to a bodega and back. 1 chased her cab for 9 blocks. When she returned from groceries the next evening, a notice was taped to her door. Eviction proceedings initiated. Violation of contract clause. Tenant conduct resulting in reputational harm to the property. She laughed. A hollow, disbelieving sound. The penthouse was paid in full. But reputation, it seemed, cost more than rent. Miles came to see her the following night, entering through the back stairwell like a ghost, avoiding the spotlight. He wore the same gray hoodie from the day he was arrested. His eyes were tired, but not dim. She opened the door, and he stood there with his hands in his pockets, like he didn't know if he was welcome. You shouldn't be here, she said. I know. They'll use it against you. Against us. I know. They stared at each other, the silence heavy with everything unspoken. She stepped aside. He entered. The apartment was stripped of its polish. Framed awards boxed. Designer furniture sold. Only the piano remained, centered like a relic she refused to part with. Miles looked at it, then at her. They're not gonna stop, he said softly. Not until you're dust. Then they'll have to sweep me too. He frowned. I can go. No. You don't need to burn for me. I'm not burning, she said. I'm waking up. He sat on the edge of the couch, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. They're calling you my lover now, he muttered. That I manipulated you. Slept my way into pity. I saw the DMs. He looked up sharply. She nodded. They're fake. I know. You don't write like that. You don't speak like that. Miles closed his eyes. Chase, he said. Yeah, people believe it? Half the internet, she said. Which half? The loud one. Miles exhaled. I can disappear, he said. Make this easier. She walked over and knelt in front of him. Don't you dare. He looked at her, surprised. I mean it, she whispered. You didn't come this far just to vanish again. Let them come. Let them smear us. But don't let them erase you. I'm not scared for me, he said. I'm scared for what they'll do to you. She smiled, tired, fierce. I've already lost everything that doesn't matter. The next morning, a black SUV parked outside her building. A man in a crisp suit approached her, on the sidewalk. He held out a card. Daybreak Studios. National syndicated talk. Live. We want both of you, he said. One chair. One story. Unfiltered. She blinked. Lev. Yes. Why? Because the world wants to see the truth. Raw. Together. No edits. One shot. Celeste looked at the card, then at the man. Are you sure it's not a trap? He smiled. If it is, it'll be televised.
That night, Miles receives a private message. Go on that show, and the video from Georgia goes live. All of it.
The studio was quiet, but it wasn't peace. It was pressure coiled and waiting to detonate. Celeste Van Doren sat in her chair under the studio lights, which bleached out any hint of nerves but magnified every vulnerability. She had done dozens of interviews in her life, but none like this. None where she wasn't in control of the narrative. None where the nation was watching to see if she would sink or claw her way to redemption. Next to her sat Miles, dressed simply, black jacket, plain shoes, shirt unbuttoned at the collar. He looked like the world had placed weight on his shoulders, and he'd learned how to carry it without shifting. There was no styling team for him. No pre-interview grooming. No PR handler waiting backstage. Just him. Still. Silent. Whole. The host, Nadine Carter, adjusted her mic. She didn't need cue cards. Her eyes were steady. Her posture poised like a woman who'd spent a lifetime navigating complicated conversations and wasn't afraid of one more. The producer gave a silent countdown. 4, 3. The red light blinked on. Good morning, America, Nadine said smoothly. Today's episode of Open Frame is unlike any we've aired before. The studio audience sat tense. Not a cough. Not a shuffle. Joining us are Celeste Van Doren and Miles Benton. Two names that until recently lived in very different worlds. A viral video brought them together, and what happened next divided the nation. The screen behind them played a quick montage. Miles at the gala piano, Celeste's tearful apology, then a flash of the arrest footage. The music in the background was Miles's own. The soft intro to letters my father couldn't read. Nadine turned. Celeste, let's start at the beginning. When you made the now infamous "if anyone can move me with music, I'll marry them" statement. Was it sincere? Celeste folded her hands. No, she said. It was a performance. I didn't want to marry the man my father was negotiating behind the scenes. I wanted to disrupt the image, so I said something reckless. I wanted attention for the wrong reasons. Nadine raised an eyebrow, and Miles walked right into it. Celeste nodded. He did. With brilliance. With honesty. And I didn't know what to do with that. I froze. I didn't protect him. Nadine let the silence grow uncomfortable. Some say you elevated him. Others say you exploited him. What do you think you did? Celeste's voice cracked. I used him to protect myself. I dressed it up in good intentions later. But the truth is, I centered myself in his story. She turned slightly, facing Miles. And I'm sorry. Miles didn't flinch. Didn't nod. His eyes met hers, calm but unreadable. Nadine turned to him. Miles, why agree to come here today? He exhaled. Because silence is also a story, and I'm tired of mine being told without me in the room. There was a slight ripple in the audience. Not clapping, just a shift in emotional weight, like everyone had just sat deeper into their seats. Nadine pressed gently. What's the hardest part of the last few weeks? Miles looked past the cameras, past the room, knowing that I had to bleed to be believed, that I had to be tackled, doxed, fired, mocked, just to make people care about the sound I made. His voice stayed steady, but it had edges now, sharp ones. That I had to be brilliant and broken for the world to pay attention. Celeste's eyes shimmered, but she didn't speak. Nadine asked, and how do you feel about Celeste now? Miles turned toward her again. She told the truth. She didn't have to. She lost everything and kept standing. I don't hate her. A pause. But I don't need her pity either. The room stilled. Then he added, I forgive her. Not because she asked. Because I'm not going to carry her mistake in my body anymore. A woman in the third row covered her mouth with her hand. A man next to her murmured, Damn. Nadine gave them space. Celeste, she said finally, has this cost you more than you expected? Celeste gave a hollow laugh. I lost my family's name, my fortune, my safety. But I found a spine. She looked out into the crowd. And if I had to choose between comfort and complicity, I'd still choose this pain. Nadine turned to the audience. We're going to open up a question from the floor. A hand shot up. An older black woman in a burgundy head wrap stood, clutching a photo in her hand. My son is in prison, she said softly. He hasn't seen his daughter in 2 years. He heard Miles's music on the radio, called me crying. Said he finally felt seen. She stepped forward. You didn't just play notes. You played memory. You played. Miles's face broke for the first time. His jaw trembled. His hand clenched. Thank you, he whispered. The studio filled with quiet tears. Even Nadine looked momentarily shaken. This moment, she said slowly, isn't just about race or class or going viral. It's about what happens when someone tells the truth, and we actually listen. She faced the camera. America, meet Miles Benton. Not as a headline, but as a human. The show faded out with slow piano music under applause. Not roaring, not explosive, but genuine. Earned. Backstage, the silence returned. Not the cold silence of dismissal, but the sacred silence of something new beginning. Miles sat alone in the green room, staring at the floor. His fingers moved unconsciously, like they were playing keys that weren't there. The door opened. A man entered. Tall, dark-skinned, bald head, turtleneck sweater. Hands in his pockets. Miles looked up. He knew the face instantly. Darian Cole. The legend. The man who had once walked off stage at Carnegie Hall because someone asked him to play something a little more upbeat. The man who hadn't given an interview in 12 years. The man who, rumor had it, didn't believe in passing torches because black fire shouldn't need permission to burn. I know you, Miles said, quietly. Darian smiled. And now I know you. He stepped closer. You did something today that even music school can't teach. You didn't perform. You bled truth. Miles stood. I didn't know anyone like you was watching. Most of us were, Darian replied. We just don't clap from the cheap seats. He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded card. There's a concert next month at Kennedy Hall. It's the Black Philharmonic's biggest night. 1 seat left. He handed it over. Miles opened it. His name was already printed. Not in small type. Not as a footnote. Miles Benton, composer and soloist. Darian leaned in slightly. You ready to stop surviving and start playing? Miles looks up slowly, and for the first time since the gala, he smiles. Not as a janitor, not as a mistake, but as someone who belongs. The morning after the broadcast felt surreal. Miles woke in Harlem, mid-rise skyline glowing through his window, as if the city itself was holding its breath for what he would do next. The envelope from Darian remained on the bedside table. Heavy, simple, elegant. It felt like destiny folded neatly into cardstock. He dressed in plain clothes, dark slacks, a crisp white shirt, careful not to overdress or underplay. Every step toward Kennedy Hall that day felt like crossing into a new world. One shaped not by whispers or assumptions, but by merit and by the music he carried inside him. The lobby of Kennedy Hall was quieter than expected. Velvet seats glowed. Portraits of great musicians lined the foyer. The kind of space that seemed to whisper, you belong here, even when you weren't sure you did. Backstage, Samuel waited, watching Miles approach with cautious awe. They built this hall for moments like yours, Samuel said softly. Go fill it. Miles nodded, clutching Darian's card like a talisman. Outside, the lobby doors opened early. The ticket site had crashed the moment Darian's name went public. Sold-out pages replaced access links within hours. Social feeds buzzed. Black Philharmonic. Adds Miles Benton. Seats vanished in 20 minutes. Miracle at Kennedy Hall. The surge wasn't just hype. It was demand for truth, for reclamation, for seeing a black genius not scrubbed clean by invisibility, but displayed proudly under orchestral lights. Meanwhile, in a refined boardroom across town, Celeste pitched quietly but with conviction. Her father's media company had funds for a philanthropic arm. Years of celebrity charity launched under her name. Now she anchored the meeting with a simple slide. Scholarship initiative. Marginalized musicians as cultural ambassadors. She spoke calmly, her voice carrying the weight of everything she'd learned. We need to create sustainable programs so the work of Miles Benton doesn't become an isolated moment. Her eyes didn't slide off the boardroom window. She stayed present. The older executives murmured. Some glanced at the margin notes. Names of historically black colleges, cost models, mentorship structures. When she finished, the cufflinks across the table exchanged subtle smiles. Let's do it, the CFO said. Small cheer broke across her chest. Her father wasn't there. He'd declined the invite. She didn't care. Back at Kennedy Hall, the lights dimmed. The orchestra warmed up. A soft hum ticked off the ushers. The audience held their breath like it was communion. Miles sat at the backstage piano, His heart drummed. He closed his eyes, hearing Samuel's voice in his head. They built this hall for moments like yours. Go fill it. Darian approached him, silent, passing a small vial of water, balanced in simplicity. You ready? He asked. Miles nodded. Darian stepped back, took his place at the conductor's podium, and raised his arms. The first chords were not Miles's. They were Beethoven, softly whispered as if coaxing him into the light. The show began. When it was his turn, they moved the chair out front. A single spotlight draped him in gentle warmth. Miles took the keys, lifted his hands, closed his eyes. He didn't repeat letters my father couldn't read. He played something new, a piece made for this moment, something that held both the loneliness of the footlights and the community beyond them. The intro was a question, then a promise. The middle, joy. The ending? A whisper of hope, not overshadowed by heartbreak, but shaped by its lessons. The crowd, packed to capacity, with overflow screens outside, sat still. When the last note faded, there was no applause, only a pause so long it felt like something sacred was being honored. Then applause, quiet at first. Then quiet turned tidal. Cameras flashed, phones recorded, tears glinted like early morning dew. Miles rose, offered a small bow. His heart felt both heavy and lifted. Backstage, Samuel caught him. He wordlessly nodded. Miles didn't need a translation. But as Kennedy Hall glowed from Miles's triumph, the world beyond tightened its grip. That same afternoon, the legal papers arrived. Summons, Chase Langford v. Miles Benton. Defamation. In small print below, allegations intentional misrepresentation and digital manipulation. Demand public retraction and $5 million damages. Miles stared at the envelope, numb. He didn't know how Chase could move so fast. But Chase had leverage. He threatened to claim the gala video was doctored, that the music had been dubbed, that the whole janitor to genius narrative was staged for views. All of it. Lies. But a court hears allegations, not intent. Miles leaned into the hallway wall, breathing through it. Then, an unexpected whisper, footsteps. Celeste appeared, pale, determined and holding 2 coffees. She handed him one. They can't retaliate when we're winning, she said. But they are going to try. He stared. They served you? Miles nodded. She sighed. Amounts insane. But they don't want money. They want the story reframed. She paused. They want the music back in a cage. Miles closed his eyes. I'm not backing off, he said, voice low. Not this time. Celeste touched his arm. We're set for court the same week as Kennedy Hall. He looked up. She met his eyes. We face both light and shadow at once, she said, which means maybe one cancels the other out. The world watched. Those lucky enough to get tickets still shared their experiences online, not just for the music, but because Miles stood tall against erasure. Meanwhile, Chase filed press releases, selectively leaking pre-trial arguments, hints of forged footage or staged authenticity. Did audiences believe it? Maybe some. But now witnesses had names, faces, context, all anchored by a violinist's call, and a scholar's defiance. Miles wasn't a joke. He was a force. Still, a tweet from Chase's camp gained traction. Can genius exist without certainty? Celeste read it as she watched Kennedy Hall livestream on her phone, her father's scholarship committee announcement, fresh in her email. Her jaw tightened, because now, this was about more than music. It was about narrative control, about who gets to define genius, and who gets to destroy it. As the camera pans out from Kennedy Hall's glowing marquee, the announcement flashes. Court date, April 14. Kennedy Hall concert. Objection or ovation. The screen fades, leaving the question suspended in the air. Will the music or the courtroom truth prevail? April 14 arrived like a war trumpet. On one side of Manhattan, the polished marble steps of the courthouse gleamed under morning light. On the other, Kennedy Hall's stage crew ran cables and tuned strings for what would become the most watched performance in the orchestra's history. Miles Benton stood between both. At 9:02 a.m., courtroom 12B was packed, press badges, legal pads, and quiet electricity. Chase Langford sat smugly at the plaintiff's table, flanked by his legal team in suits sharper than any argument they'd prepared. Celeste sat behind Miles, dressed plainly, jaw set, gaze hard. The judge entered, a woman of color in her late 60s with a commanding stillness that made the air tremble. This is not a trial about music, she said. Opening remarks. It's about credibility, Race, power, and who gets to tell the truth without punishment. The prosecution argued first. Chase's lawyer was deliberate, precise. The defendant capitalized on false perception. The video was viral manipulation. The music was pre-recorded. He leveraged public empathy based on a contrived narrative. He gestured to Miles. This man turned pity into platform, and we can prove it. The defense stood. Miles's attorney, a young, brilliant woman named Sherry Holcomb, didn't use notes. Mr. Benton has never profited from the video, she said. He lost employment, housing, privacy. He's been arrested, slandered, and dragged for his race, not his ride. She clicked a remote. On the screen, stills of Miles at the gala, then a slow playback of the actual video. Fingers sweat, sync. Live audio, unedited, real. Sherry spoke calmly. This is not a fabrication. It's evidence of the genius the world was told to ignore. The judge nodded once. Then, call your next witness. Celeste walked to the stand. The gallery hushed. She was sworn in, voice steady, fingers clenched around truth. Miss Van Doren, the prosecutor asked, is it true you orchestrated the gala's challenge as a stunt? Yes, she said, but not to help Miles. That part wasn't planned. It was my own vanity. And the video, was it doctored? No, she said firmly. That man played live. I heard every note. He stopped the world with his hands. The prosecutor leaned in. Were you emotionally involved? Celeste paused. Yes. A murmur. The judge raised her hand. Silence returned. Emotion doesn't negate truth, Celeste added. It amplifies it. Sherry stood on redirect.
Miss Van Doren, did you benefit from Mr. Benton's fame?
No. I lost everything. And would you do it again? I already did, she said. And I'll keep doing it. The judge took her time. Recess was called. Miles sat in the hallway alone, hands folded. Samuel appeared, placing a hand on his shoulder. No matter what happens, he said, you already won. But Miles shook his head. No. I need them to say it. Out loud.
Back in session.
The courtroom stilled. Reporters leaned in. The judge cleared her throat. In the matter of Langford v. Benton, the court finds in favor of the defendant, Mr. Miles Benton. A beat of silence. Then, applause. Brief. Reprimanded. But undeniable. Chase's face cracked in confusion and rage. His team began to mutter. But it was over. Miles stood numb, breath caught in his throat. Celeste gripped his hand, squeezing once. The judge glanced up, her voice softer. Mr. Benton, you may not know this, but justice doesn't always come wrapped in triumph. Sometimes it just arrives. She gave the faintest smile. Now go give them music. Kennedy Hall, 8:01 p.m. The air buzzed like an electrical current. Camera crews flanked every aisle. A special stream was purchased by over 1 million viewers. International news anchors announced the performance like it was a coronation. Miles entered backstage still in his courtroom clothes. But now, they fit him differently. Not as armor, as truth. The orchestra took their places. Darian gave him a nod from the wings. Tonight, he said, we don't play to impress. We play to reclaim. Miles stepped out. The hall rose to greet him. Thousands of people. Thousands of beating hearts. Waiting. He sat.
No introduction, no speech.
Just fingers to keys. And then, fire. It wasn't music anymore. It was rage, grace, redemption. It was every hallway he'd mopped, every slur he'd swallowed, every talent denied, every scholarship stolen. He played like God had given him one night to speak for every silent genius this country ever ignored. The orchestra met him beat for beat. When he finished, he didn't look up. He didn't need to. The roar came anyway. A wall of sound, standing ovation, hands raised, tears on cheeks. And backstage, Celeste waiting, a single flower in hand. He approached. Her eyes shimmered. She whispered, barely audible beneath the thunder behind him. I wasn't joking about marrying whoever could play that piano. Miles's breath catches. The stage lights flicker behind him, and for a second it's not just music anymore. It's a future. The thunder of applause still echoed as Miles stepped off stage. His chest heaved from the weight of it all. The court ruling, the concert, the impossible arc that had brought him here. But the noise behind him couldn't compare to the quiet storm building beside him. Celeste stood in the wings, watching him like someone realizing they had been looking at a map upside down their whole life. Her fingers tightened around a single white rose she'd picked up from a fan bouquet, meant for him. She stepped forward, her heels clicking softly on the polished wood. Miles. He turned. No spotlight. No music. Just her voice, trembling with something dangerously close to certainty. She didn't say anything at first.
Neither did he.
They just stood there, inches apart, breathing each other in. No velvet curtains, no court transcripts, no janitor uniforms or gala dresses. Just two people who had survived too much to pretend anymore. Then she took his hand. "Come with me," she said. She led him back toward the stage, not in front of the orchestra this time, not into the roar of a full hall, but toward the quiet glow still radiating from the grand piano. The hall was still packed. No one had left. The murmurs returned as the audience saw them reappear. First confusion, then silence, and then something more electric. Expectation. Celeste turned to Miles and spoke not to the crowd, not to the cameras, but directly to him. "You remember what I said at the gala?" she asked softly, voice cutting through the hush like a blade of light. "If anyone could move me with music." Miles finished. She nodded. "And you did. You didn't just move me, you undid me, note by note." Then, in one smooth motion, Celeste stepped forward past the echo of her family's shame, past the months of spin and scandal, and dropped to one knee. Gasps rippled. But she didn't flinch. "Miles Benton," she said, her voice now steady, resonant, real. "You reminded me what truth feels like, and I want to spend the rest of my life never letting go of that sound. Will you marry me?" Silence, then a tremble. Then, tears. Miles knelt down too, his hands gripping hers, their foreheads nearly touching. "Yes," he whispered, eyes locked to hers. "Yes, I will." The crowd stood again. Not for the pianist, not for the heiress, but for the story that had turned grief into grace. Applause erupted. Flashbulbs popped. Cell phones lit up like constellations in the darkened hall. And still, they knelt, holding on to each other, not for the cameras, not for the spectacle, but because it was finally safe to fall. By midnight, the internet had done what the internet does best. The video was everywhere. Kennedy Hall marriage proposal shocks world. From janitor to fiancé, the Miles Benton miracle. Celeste's redemption arc, PR or poetry. Hashtags exploded. Benton ballad, play and promise. From keys to knees, critics split down the middle. Some called it opportunistic, an heiress trying to whitewash her guilt. They typed furiously. A viral love story crafted by crisis. Others saw magic. A modern-day Baldwin and Lord fairy tale, tweeted one journalist. But Miles and Celeste were gone. Not vanished, but intentionally absent. They left no press statements, no engagement ring photos, no branded interviews, just silence. Weeks later, a small press release landed quietly on the bottom half of a local Georgia newspaper. The Benton Music House opens in Ellison Creek.
No fanfare. No celebrity ribbon cutting.
Just a photo. A reclaimed brick building with cracked windows fixed. A wooden sign hand-painted in deep burgundy letters. Inside, the floors had been waxed, and old pews from a nearby closed church had been repurposed into benches for kids learning rhythm through clapping exercises. A studio in the back held the restored church piano Miles had once practiced on, keys still cracked, but now framed in polished mahogany. There were no name plaques, no mentions of Celeste, but her fingerprints were everywhere, in the upgraded equipment, the scholarships, the hot meals served to children staying late for practice. "I don't want this to be about me," she'd told Miles. He nodded. "I just want it to last." In a small classroom toward the rear of the center, Miles sat beside a boy no older than 9. The boy, Jaden, was nonverbal, not by choice but by trauma. His mother had found the school after a viral video about Miles's trial. She brought Jaden in once, nervously asking if music could reach him where words hadn't. Miles didn't promise anything. He just invited the boy to touch the keys. Weeks passed. Jaden didn't speak, but he started showing up earlier. Started pointing at the piano bench before Miles even arrived. And one day, Miles guided Jaden's hands over a few white keys. Jaden listened, then felt, then played them again, without assistance. A small melody, 3 notes, then 4. And when the boy stopped, his fingers hovering over the keys, he looked at Miles and smiled. No sound, but everything was said. Celeste filmed from the hallway. Not for TikTok, not for engagement, just to remember. The clip leaked anyway, by accident. Or maybe fate. It was only 15 seconds. No captions. No music overlay. Just the boy, silent, then playing. Miles, nodding. Encouraging. And a voice behind the camera whispering, "Music speaks." Within hours, the clip went viral. Not in the wildfire way of tabloid drama, but in the slow, steady swell of something real. Educators, therapists, and parents shared it. This is why art matters. He gave that child more than music. He gave him language. Silent no more. They called it the sound of feeling. Not a trend. A testament. Back in Ellison Creek, Miles sat on the porch of the music house, watching dusk bleed into stars. Celeste joined him, handing him tea. He looked tired, but not the kind of tired that bleeds despair. The kind that says, "I'm building something." "You realize," Celeste said softly, "we created a ripple we can't control." Miles smiled, sipping slowly. "Maybe that's the point," he said. She leaned her head against his shoulder. "Do you miss the noise?" He shook his head. "I miss silence less." They sat that way for a long time. The final scene cuts to another new student arriving at the music school. Barefoot, eyes wide, hands bandaged from farm work. As he touches a key for the first time, we hear a faint melody begin to form. Miles looks up and smiles again. Morning light filtered through dust-speckled windows of the Benton Music House, illuminating motes of hope dancing in the quiet. What was once a dilapidated community center, now pulsed with life, less ornate than city recital halls, but richer in something rarer purpose. Miles placed his palms gently on the worn piano keys. Keys he once cleaned hesitantly, now pressed with authority, with gratitude. Celeste paused at the entrance, watching him recoil into that moment. Not as a performer, but as a father, a teacher, a man who had reclaimed every part of himself. The montage began. Close up. A first audition in a predominantly white conservatory. Elijah's hands shaking, then settling into a confident arpeggio. His face lit up when the panel asked for more. A stark contrast to the blank silences he once received. Cut to Tabitha, a fierce teen, her cello humming with defiance in a local shelter-funded recital. A scholarship letter in her hands. Behind her, her grandmother's tears glared with pride. Next, Celeste's father seated in the audience of the Benton Music House for the first public fundraising recital. His suit too big, his posture stiff, but his eyes glowed with a silent awe. His phone recording tears brimming as Miles introduced him as the man who challenged me to see beneath the polished surface. And then the courtroom documents, stamped overturned, the wrongful conviction of Miles's father, Michael Benton Sr., at last vacated. Celeste watched the board of pardon read by an overworked clerk, her face pale, breath caught, as the cell door released layers of intergenerational grief. Miles stood outside, playing the opening notes of letters. My father couldn't read, slow and shimmering, as Michael stepped into the daylight, eyes brimming, mouth opening in silence that held oceans. The piano, that instrument meant to hold boundaries, broke them. Back to present. Celeste entered the main hall where students were lining up. Young, brown-skinned, eager, and relentless. Each one played a note. Some shy, some bold. All heard. The Benton Music House now buzzed every evening. It wasn't just a building anymore. It was a current pulling everyone forward. Miles stood beside Celeste silently observing. She squeezed his hand, tight with meaning. Unexpected twist. In the back, almost hidden, stood a young woman in her 20s. Curly hair tied back, clutching a folding fan. She watched each student. One glance at Miles. Then she opened the fan. On it was written in delicate gold script. From mops to maestros, your story changed mine. That handwritten note, addressed only to them, spoke more than words. It said influence echoes. That evening, after the center had emptied and the piano stood silent once more, Celeste and Miles sat side by side on the repaired wooden bench stage, framed by soft lamplight. Miles exhaled. We built more than a school, he said. Celeste nodded. We built a line of sight. Their eyes met. There was peace there, rare, hard-won, and as contagious as laughter. But then Celeste pointed upward. Mounted above the stage was the broken janitor sign, the rusted metal placard that once read, "Please don't touch," now cleaned, framed, and lit with reverence. That old sign, once a silent emblem of erasure, now glowed with transformation. Miles touched it. He whispered, "You dared all those years ago. You dared." She leaned her head on his shoulder. No one else saw it, but I did. The final shot lingers on the broken janitor sign, shining above them, as if dared to be remembered, not for who it labeled, but for who it invited to rewrite its meaning. Some people are born with brilliance, and still get told to clean the floor, not touch the keys. If Miles's story made you feel something, it's because too many like him stay unheard. Type yes if you believe talent has no color. Subscribe if you know dignity